If you or someone that you know suffers from Raynaud syndrome, you have probably gone to the solution of using a hand warmer to keep your hands warm. And you've probably found that it goes out once you've wrapped your cold hand around it and ended up in frustration. What we're going to do is discuss an easy hack you can do to your hand warmer, to almost any hand warmer, to help lessen the probability of cold shocking your hand warmer to make it inoperable. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned and we will go into it in more detail. First of all, we are going to discuss the dynamics behind why your hand warmer does get extinguished. And we're going to be talking about cold shocking your hand warmer. If you're already familiar with that, then feel free to skip through to the part where we demonstrate the hack, which you'll find in the timeline. And we're going to move into now the graph of explaining why the cold shock phenomena with a hand warmer is one of the most frustrating things that most hand warmer users face.
This chart illustrates the relationship between the liquid fuel in your hand warmer, which is generally naphtha of some sort, the need for it to evaporate in order to support the exothermic reaction, and the ecosystem that governs how all that will take place. So here we have the curve which shows the temperature and how it relates to how much of the naphtha is evaporating. So think of this as being the temperature of your hand warmer, and there's some typical hand warmers shown here. The S Boston at the top, which gets the hottest, the butterfly, which is the generic Chinese clone style hand warmers, in the middle, and the Zippos, which tend to operate at the lowest nominal temperatures. So let's look first at what happens with one of the hotter hand warmers, the S Boston, and we're going to look at this in relation to if you cold shock the hand warmer. And by cold shock, I mean the hand warmer gets put into a state of not functioning in a healthy manner. And that happens because the temperature of the liquid fuel in the reservoir gets down below the point where it can evaporate up into the head and support the exothermic reaction. So the S Boston, for example, nominally operates around 160 Fahrenheit and in that area. So we would be looking at somewhere up around in here to be the area where the S Boston works. The butterfly would be somewhere around in this range, and that's what you're looking at there. And then of course the Zippo, you're looking at this range in here. So what you want is to keep your hand warmer reservoir at least above this 100 Fahrenheit area. Optimally, if you have it operating up around 160 to 170, you can see where you're going to be getting this percentage volume of 40% up in there, as opposed to the relative half of that amount of 20% in a standard style Zippo. Now, these are seat of the pants values, which are shown here to illustrate efficiency on a relative basis. It doesn't necessarily represent absolute volume diffusion of the liquid fuel through the substrate in the reservoir, which could be carbon felt or cotton or some sort of polyester blend. So keep that in mind, and that may help you conceptualize why the concept of cold shock can negatively affect your hand warmer to the point where it is no longer functioning.
Okay, so now that we understand the principles behind why cold shock will disable your hand warmer, let's go into a mitigation that you can employ. And again, please note, this is a mitigation. It's not the magic sauce or some miracle solution. It will only help you with the cold shock not happening quite as quickly. It still won't prevent it. What we're going to do is the heat from the head of the hand warmer transmits itself into the body, the reservoir of the hand warmer, which is this part, and that brings the mass up to the point where it will support evaporation of the naphtha into the head, where the exothermic reaction takes place. When you wrap your cold hand around it, it cools this whole surface to the point where the evaporation stops. So what the thinking is if you can have another conductive surface that will help conduct the heat from here down into your reservoir, that is less susceptible to the cold shock environment that is imposed by your hand, then you can help stave off the onset of the cold shock. Again, it won't prevent it, but it may just bridge that gap between the hand warmer being completely disabled or coming back to life. And so here it is. It will cost about under 5 cents for you to do this, and probably take under 5 minutes. So what I've done is you remove the head, and what have I got here? I've got a screw, and that's all it is. It takes the heat from the hand warmer head, conducts it down into the material in the body of the reservoir, and helps to promote, to some extent, a little bit more evaporation when this surface is getting too cold to support the evaporation. So what have we got here? Well, it's basically a 2.5-inch screw. The head was a little bit wider than the neck of the hand warmer, so I just took a grinder, or you could file it, the edges of the screw flat so that the head can fit on, and you'll have to play with it a bit because otherwise it can pop your head off. And you can solve that by getting it down a little bit deeper in, and this is all it is. We'll show you here. A 2.5-inch screw. Just find a screw that matches the depth. I suspect that in order to get this head down a wee bit further, I might have to grind just the very little tip of this off and then reinsert it. I actually drilled out a little bit of a channel hole in there, but I'm sure that you could just screw this back in like so. And there we have our head. So again, then you can align up the sides that you flattened and you can place this anywhere. I would assume that putting it in the middle would do. Just experiment with it and see if it works for you. If not, it hasn't cost you anything and hasn't really made any big changes to your hand warmer. Please let me know through the comments below if this in fact has made any difference in your life.